Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 tier listing guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're continuing with my complete tier list for every single piece of armor in Baldur's Gate 3, and we're covering medium armors. In part 1 we covered cloth and robes, and in part 2 we covered light armors, so in this part, medium it is. Medium armor is probably the strongest of the armor types available in Baldur's Gate 3. It has the highest average quality of armor types because there's a lot of very powerful armors that fall in this category, and it's also extremely commonly worn. By default, medium armor is available to clerics, rangers, and barbarians, as well, of course, as classes that have heavier armor proficiencies, but you can also gain it from several subclasses of more lightly armored classes, and Githyanki and shield dwarves have racial medium armor proficiency. So, no matter what character class you make her, Lae'zel will always have medium armor proficiency, and if you are playing one of those races as a custom character, you'll get medium armor proficiency as well. So, you're very likely to have multiple characters in your party wearing medium armor at a time, either because they're a class that normally doesn't get it, that is upgrading to medium, or because the classes that cap out at medium armor proficiency are very happy to be in medium armor, since it's generally speaking so good. It's not uncommon to have 3 or more characters in your party in medium armor at a time, so knowing which ones are right to pick, it will help your party out significantly. By this point, you know the drill. I'm rating these by act, so by availability per act, and I will be rating them based on the quality of the armor at the time that you get it. So, armors to the right will tend to be, on average, stronger in absolute terms, because I'm rating how important it is to actually pick up and use this armor when you first have access to it. In S tier, armors that are best in slot for either lots of builds or particularly powerful builds. In A tier, armors that are best in slot for narrower builds or interesting alternatives to the S tier armor. In B tier, armors that have high utility for certain niche builds. In C tier, armors that have uses if you're doing something a little bit weird with your party composition. And in D tier, armors that are rarely ever going to be particularly useful for most party compositions. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Chris Dillon for the $2 donation, Jobot Go for the $5, Athena T for the $10, and Raider Smitty for the $10, as well as Gambling Gecko for becoming a channel member. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support, and it really does mean a lot. Alright, let's rate some medium armors. First up, the Damaged Scale Mail. So this is a non-magical medium armor. It drops from some enemies later on in Act 1, and has 12 base armor class, and like all other medium armors, unless stated otherwise, gives you disadvantage on stealth checks and caps the maximum armor class that you can get from dexterity at +2. So if you have 14 or higher dexterity, this will give you 14 base AC. By the time you get this armor, you will have way better armor options. Most characters with medium armor proficiency start with better armor than this. It doesn't even sell for that much, so there's just no reason to ever pick up the Damaged Scale Mail, and it's going straight into D tier. The Chain Shirt. So first off, I'm going to try not to nitpick the accuracy of these armors too much, but I will say it's a little bit weird that in 5th edition D&D, the only thing that is actually mail of any of these armors is the one thing that isn't called mail. The mail is a specific kind of armor. It's the interlocked rings that D&D calls chain. And so all of these things that are scale mail aren't, whereas this chain shirt actually is. That's neither here nor there. The chain shirt is 13 AC. It's the starting armor for clerics. It's dropped by some early game enemies. Shadowheart starts with 1, so it's one of the first sets of medium armor that you'll get, and you almost always start with a set of this available to your party. It's the worst medium armor, other than the damaged scale, because it's 13 AC with no magical effect, and so you might think that there's no reason to ever pick this up, but there is actually a use case for the chain shirt. If you're playing a ranger or a barbarian, you start with, if you're a ranger, leather armor, the light armor, leather armor, which has 11 AC, and if you're a barbarian, you start with clothing. So if you're playing a ranger, you can and the first piece of medium armor that you find is the chain shirt, you can upgrade your AC by putting on the chain shirt. If you're playing a barbarian with less than 16 constitution, then you can upgrade your armor class by putting on the chain shirt. So there is technically a use case for chain shirts that drop early in the game. For that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Most of the time, if you just ignore the chain shirt, you'll just be fine, but there are occasionally times where this is going to be the right thing to pick up and put on. The Scale Mail. So the Scale Mail is 14 armor class, non-magical armor, so one higher than the chain shirt, and is the starting armor for fighters. So if your starting character is a fighter, then you'll start with one of these in your inventory. The Scale Mail also drops very, very early in the game, because the devils on the Nautiloid, the Cambions and Commander Zulk, have Scale Mail that they will drop if you kill them, which means that it's many parties' first actual upgrade is putting on this Scale Mail. Since Shadowheart starts with a chain shirt in her inventory for 13 AC, the Scale Mail is an upgrade for her in most playthroughs. So any playthrough where Shadowheart is accompanying you for the early game, you're going to want to put her in Scale Mail instead of in this chain shirt in order to upgrade her armor class. Now, it's true that chain shirt doesn't impose stealth disadvantage and Scale Mail does, but since you so rarely roll stealth checks in Baldur's Gate 3, that's just not something you should really consider when you're looking at these medium armors. Instead, you want to look at the armor class and effects of the armor. Stealth disadvantage is just not a huge penalty in Baldur's Gate, so the Scale Mail is a pretty significant upgrade in the early game. Now, one armor class in the early game isn't going to make or break your entire game, and it will pretty quickly be superseded by other armor upgrades. So the Scale Mail will be a nice armor upgrade for the very, very early game if you get it, but if you miss it, it's not going to cripple your party or anything like that. So I'm going to put it in A tier because it's just a solid upgrade for the very early game, but will quickly be surpassed by other options. The Breastplate. So the Breastplate is 14 armor class and is identical to the Scale Mail, except that it doesn't impose stealth disadvantage, whereas the Scale Mail does. Since stealth disadvantage mostly doesn't matter, the Breastplate is not a significant upgrade over the basic non-magical Scale Mail, and it's not available till near the end of Act 1, whereas the Scale Mail is available right from the beginning. Turns out the same armor at the end of Act 1 is a lot worse than it was at the very beginning of Act 1, so the Breastplate is just never worth picking up. D tier. The Githyanki Halfplate. This is 15 armor class, non-magical medium armor, and is Lae'zel's starting armor. So it's 2 AC better than the chain shirt that clerics start with, 1 AC better than Scale Mail that fighters start with, and you will have it right from the beginning of the game. You get more copies of this later on in Act 1, but by that time you maybe have alternative options for medium armor, so the important armor set here is the one that you start with. With 15 armor class, base, plus 2 from your dexterity, if you have 14 or higher dexterity, plus a shield, you can reach 19 AC right from the beginning of the game with this armor set, which most enemies in the very early game are going to struggle quite hard to be able to hit, which makes your party quite a bit more resilient if you're using a character with that setup. Even if you have heavy armor users, like Lae'zel herself, as a fighter, this is probably going to be their best armor option for a big chunk of the early game. It takes a while before you find armor that's better than 17 AC, because remember, this lets you use 2 of your dex bonus, whereas heavy armors don't. So this is going to be your highest AC setup for a pretty significant portion of Act 1. And even when you get upgrades to a heavy armor user, there's a good chance that your medium armor characters are still going to end up wearing the Githyanki Halfplate quite a ways into the game. Shadowheart in particular will often end up putting on the Githyanki Halfplate, because if you're keeping her as like a trickery cleric or something, much, I imagine, to both her and Lae'zel's annoyance. So this armor is going to be best in slot for heavy or medium armor users for a significant chunk of Act 1. You start with it, and you definitely are going to want to make heavy use of this armor, and I'm putting it in S tier. Just the high armor class available right from the beginning of the game makes this an awesome armor to have access to, and it's going to be your best option for most of the early game. The Halfplate. Halfplate is functionally identical to Githyanki Halfplate, but not available until near the end of Act 1. In fact, from the same merchant who will sell you a breastplate. Just like with the breastplate versus the Scale Mail, the same armor at the end of Act 1 is a lot worse than that armor at the beginning of Act 1. 15 AC non-magical medium armor by that point is just not something that you heavily value. You will have tons of options for that at that point, and so the Halfplate is just never going to be worth picking up. D tier. The +1 Breastplate. The +1 Breastplate has 15 armor class and gives you 1 resistance to piercing damage, so it reduces all piercing damage that you take by 1. It's available for merchants from level 6 to level 8, so when your party is level 6 to level 8. A lot of these enchanted armors, the basic enchanted armors, are available based on your party's level, and the +1 breastplate is first available starting at party level 6. However, there's a trick to this, because there's also a +1 breastplate available to steal in the Druid Grove near Damon's Forge. Since you are entering the Druid Grove relatively early in most playthroughs, this is going to be your first opportunity to pick up a second 15 AC piece of armor alongside the Githyanki half-plate that you started with for almost every party. In fact, I believe that for most playthroughs, because having 2 characters with 19 AC with a shield or 17 AC with a 2-handed weapon makes your party vastly more resilient in the early game, unless you are doing something odd with your team composition or the order that you're playing through the game in, one of your very first priorities when playing through Baldur's Gate should be to steal and equip this +1 breastplate. It just increases the survivability of your party significantly. The 1 piercing damage mitigation is also not totally irrelevant. Piercing is usually the most relevant of the 3 physical damage resistances because it blocks damage from enemy archers, who are just the most likely at type of enemies to hurt you, since you can't just move away from them to stop them from attacking you often, and because you're facing a lot of goblins in the early game who have a lot of archers and therefore a lot of piercing damage. The 1 piercing damage resistance is actually quite important and will help improve your survivability in the early game significantly. Since by the time you get access to this, you probably don't have heavy armor that's better than the medium armor that you have available. This is going to be your second good piece of armor that you just have for your party and is going to increase the survivability of your party drastically. The only parties that don't want this are parties that have only 1 user of medium armor. Even then, medium armor or heavy armor, even then it's still an upgrade over the Gith half-plate. But if you're doing an odd composition, maybe you want to avoid this, but for the vast majority of parties, this is an S-tier acquisition and one that you should try to get very early in the game. The +1 chain shirt. So this is 14 AC magic armor, and it's available for merchants when your party is between levels 2 and 4. So you're going to be able to pick it up from whatever the first merchant you go to is, assuming that they roll it with the random rolls. The first merchant you go to is probably in the Grove. Oh, it also gives you 1 resistance to slashing damage, which isn't a huge bonus, but is relevant. The first merchant that you go to is probably in the Grove. So 14 AC armor is going to be worse than the Gith half-plate that you started with, or the +1 breastplate that you can steal from the Grove. So unless you're doing an alternate order or something, you will probably have 2 better options than the +1 chain shirt. So you're only going to use this if your party has 3 medium armor users. Now that's not an uncommon setup, because by this point in the game, heavy armor users are still wearing medium armor. So if you have like a fighter plus a cleric plus a ranger, a totally normal party setup, you're going to want 3 sets of medium armor, and in which case that party is going to be interested in buying the +1 chain shirt. Now you already have scale mail, so it's not a significant upgrade. Scale mail available, so it's not a significant upgrade, but it will be an upgrade at that point. And so I'm going to put it in B tier because there are party setups where you want to buy the +1 chain shirt from the first merchant that you find. It can be a small but meaningful upgrade for some party setups, though again, it will, similar to the scale mail, it will relatively quickly be overtaken by better armor options. The Dark Justiciar mail. So the Dark Justiciar mail is the first of the unique magical items that we're going to discuss here, although calling it unique is a bit of a stretch because there's 3 different versions of the Dark Justiciar mail available in the game. This version is the uncommon one that you loot in Grimforge. It's an uncommon or green-bordered magic item that gives you 13 base armor class, no disadvantage on stealth checks, but still caps your dexterity bonus at +2, and while you are obscured by shadow, so if you're in a darkened area or a low light area, then when an enemy hits you with a melee attack, you retaliate with 1d4 necrotic damage. 13 armor class is obviously very weak at this point in the game, because you already have at least 15 armor class options available. So you would be taking a pretty significant AC penalty to use this, and that could be okay because you do want to get hit in order to make use of this effect. So I can see potentially some kind of retaliation build making use of the Dark Justiciar mail, where you're doing some sort of Armour of Agility, Bear Totem Barbarian thing, maybe, where you have medium armor proficiency, you cast Armour of Agility on yourself, you cast Fire Shield on yourself, and this just gives you an extra d4 of necrotic damage. Obviously, this is going to be overtaken by better retaliation options later on in the game, but in theory, there could be a build that used the Dark Justiciar mail, so I'm going to put it in C tier. Obviously, this is a pretty weak magical item, and you certainly are not going to want to build around it in most circumstances, but I think it is technically possible to do a build based around the retaliation damage that does want this 1d4 of retaliation damage, and so we'll put it in C tier, mostly being generous here. The +1 half-plate. So this is 16 AC armor that provides you with 1 damage resistance to piercing damage, which is the best type for your armor to give you resistance to, other than all damage, of course. And is available for merchants starting at character level 6, from level 6 through level 8. Since level 6 is still probably in Act 1, it depends on exactly how much content you do, depending on whether you do every piece of content in Act 1 or go early on into Act 2. You might be level 6 at the end of Act 1. You might be level 7 by the time you're in Act 2. But you should be able to access this in Act 1 in most playthroughs, which means that this is going to be either your first or second piece of 16 AC medium armor that you have access to. That's a pretty significant upgrade from the 15 AC armor. So being able to buy this and upgrade to a higher armor class is going to boost your party's effectiveness significantly. Now, you do have better options for 16 AC medium armor available around this time, and heavy armor users will also around this time be converting to actually using heavy armor rather than just using medium armor because it gives you the dexterity bonus as well. So the +1 half-plate is less critical to upgrade to than a lot of these other armors, but is still going to provide most parties with a benefit when you have access to it if you have 2 or more medium armor users in your party. For that reason, I'm going to put it in A tier, because I think most parties are going to get a pretty significant, are going to get a bonus out of the +1 half-plate. Not every party is going to need this, and if you miss it, it's not the end of the world, because it is just +1 AC, but +1 AC is definitely relevant, so keep an eye out for the +1 half-plate when your party becomes level 6. The Hedge Wanderer Armor. So the Hedge Wanderer Armor, it has 13 armor class, gives you +1 to your nature checks, or actually gives you nature +1, which works the same as the light armor that gives you stealth +1, where it's actually a bonus to your nature proficiency rather than a bonus to your nature check, which means that if you have nature expertise, it gives you +2 to nature rather than only +1. That's just a funny little corner case, it mostly doesn't matter, but this improves your nature checks. It also gives you +1 to your dex saves and your dex ability checks, so stealth and sleight of hand, and importantly doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth, so you can use this and still actually gain the bonus from the stealth check, from the +1 to stealth checks, because you don't have disadvantage. 13 AC, though, is a pretty significant penalty, and those boosts, in my opinion, simply do not make up for it. If you know that there's a nature check that you specifically want to pass, then this is one that you could swap in before, like, entering that area or entering that conversation. This can also be used to swap in to give a medium armor character who's your sleight of hand character an additional +1 on their sleight of hand checks. So it does have some use if you want to swap this armor in. It's not one that I would ever want to wear full time because it just reduces your armor class for very, very minor bonuses, but the additional skill bonuses could be used if you know that there's a check that you want to make. For that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Honestly, I don't think that it's worth the time and effort to swap in for the +1 bonus to your sleight of hand checks, but if you really do want to strictly optimize, then the Hedge Wanderer armor does allow you to do that. The +1 Hide. +1 Hide is identical to the Hedge Wanderer armor, but worse. 13 AC, no disadvantage on stealth checks, +1 to your dex saves and checks, but no bonus to your nature check. It's available for merchants from parties level 2 to 4, which is the same as the +1 chain shirt, and so the +1 hide is just worse in every respect than multiple other armors. If you want a armor from a merchant at that level, buy the chain shirt, it gives you more AC, and if you even want that bonus to dex checks, then just buy the Hedge Wanderer armor. It's available at the same time because it's in the Druid Grove, so it's a rare playthrough that will see the +1 hide armor and not be able to buy the Hedge Wanderer armor. So there's just no reason to ever buy this because it's a strictly worse version of an armor that's available at the same time as it. Sort of odd that they decided to put those two armors both in the game at once. The Luminous Armour. Alright, now we are talking. So the Luminous Armour has 15 base armor class and the Radiating Shockwave ability, which is whenever the wearer deals radiant damage, they cause Radiating Orb to everything within 10 feet. Radiating Orb they cause 2 turns of Radiating Orb. Radiating Orb stacks for up to 10 turns of duration, and for every turn of duration remaining, reduces enemy attack rolls by that much. So a character that has 10 turns on it, of Radiating Orb on it, is taking a -10 penalty to its attack rolls. That means that this item, or this effect, basically instantly wins any boss fight where you can stack Radiating Orb. It's very easy to get a build that stacks 10 turns immediately, right at the start of the encounter. And so the Luminous Armour is part of one of the strongest honor mode builds in the entire game. It also has 15 base armor class, which at the time that you get it is just the best armor class available. It's tied with the Gith half-plate and the +1 breastplate. So the Luminous Armour would be a top-tier armor even without the game-breakingly powerful ability. Even if you don't optimize around this ability, radiant damage is not that hard to come by for most parties. Even if you aren't doing like a Radiating Orb stacking cleric build specifically, this is still just a very good armor for clerics. It's a good armor for paladins. It's a good armor for characters that just have a little bit of incidental radiant damage that they're doing. Because even if you aren't abusing this mechanic, it is still going to be a very powerful effect. Even 2 turns of -2 attack penalty is pretty nice in a lot of fights, and decreasing the enemy's attack will just instantly win most of the more difficult boss fights in the entire game, because a lot of enemies in this game have to hit their attacks in order for them to do anything. Radiating Orb stops them from doing that immediately. I think there's a decent argument that the Luminous Armour is the 3rd strongest item in the entire game, after Elixirs of Hill Giant Strength and the Gloves of Dexterity, in terms of improving your chances of winning honor mode. And if it's not the 3rd, it's definitely in the top 10 or so strongest items in the entire game, bar none. So the Luminous Armour is just a ridiculously powerful armor. I have decided not to include an S+ tier for these armors, but it certainly would be if we were including an S+ tier, because it is just an absolutely game-winning armor. So we're putting it in S tier, of course. The +1 Scale Mail. So this is another 15 AC armor, available from merchants from levels 4 to 6. It's identical otherwise to the +1 Breastplate, except that it does give you stealth disadvantage, and it reduces slashing damage by 1 instead of piercing damage by 1. By the time that you get the +1 Scale Mail, you've gotten a number of Githyanki half-plates available, you have the +1 Breastplate available, it's very possible that you have the Luminous Armour available, so you're just not really in the market for a 15 AC medium armor at this point. So I think, other than maybe doing something unusual with the ordering that you play the game in, you will just have better 15 AC medium armors by the time you have this available. It can be a very minor upgrade if one of your party members is still wearing the Gith half-plate by level 4, but the +1 Scale Mail will not be a significant upgrade. For that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier, because you could buy it for the 1 slashing damage over the Githyanki half-plate, but it's just not really necessarily worth going out of your way for. So unless you are doing very small optimizations, don't worry about this armor. the Slippery Chain Shirt. So this is a really cool armor that I really wish was better, honestly, because it would be really fun to be able to use this ability. Sadly, this armor is pretty weak. It gives you 13 AC and the Cautious Healer ability, which reads, when the wearer heals a creature, it automatically disengages and won't trigger opportunity attacks. That's a bit of an ambiguous tooltip, but it is the wearer of the armor that gets the disengage effect, not the target of the healing. So you can wear this armor, heal another creature or yourself, and get an automatic disengage so you can move out of combat without triggering an opportunity attack. Unfortunately, this just doesn't come up that often, because if you're a medium armor character, you usually don't want to leave melee. Medium armor is a high AC setup, so you'd rather enemies be tied up in melee with your medium armor characters, because you'll just have the AC to tank through them. So you wouldn't want to disengage that often. So even if when it would come up, it's actually not something that you'll want to do that frequently. It's also a survivability-focused item that has 13 armor class, and how often is the ability to get a free disengage every once in a while going to be worth more than just having 2 higher AC? Almost never. You'd almost always just rather have the higher armor class to keep your healer alive. I also tested an item combo because I thought this might have a cool use with the Cloak of Cunning Broom that gives you a fog cloud whenever you disengage, and unfortunately it doesn't work because it doesn't count as an actual disengage item, disengage action for that item. So there's no cool combination with the Slippery Chain Shirt, which is really sad to me. I think that would be a really cool item combo that could give you like a permanent movable fog cloud, which would be awesome. Maybe they'll change that in a patch at some point, but unfortunately, as of right now, it doesn't work. And so there's just no circumstance where the Slippery Chain Shirt is going to be worth picking up, and I'm going to put it in D tier. Really wish this item was better. If it had 15 AC, it would be pretty cool. So that would be a potential buff if Larian were looking to buff some lesser used items. The Oakfather's Embrace. This is a 13 AC armor that gives you undead that hit you take 1d6 radiant damage, and beasts that hit you deal an extra d6 of radiant damage. Obviously, you don't want to wear this against beasts, because taking that extra damage can be pretty dangerous. But against undead, the 1d6 retaliation damage is not totally irrelevant. It's theoretically possible that you could swap this in if you're doing a kind of retaliation build with the Dark Justiciar mail. You could swap it in alongside the retaliation setup when you're fighting undead. And 1d6 radiant is a little better than 1d4 necrotic, so it's going to be, it will improve your damage against undead marginally in those encounters, but honestly, that's just such a marginal use that I'm still going to put this in D tier. It's just a 13 AC armor without a real ability, so D tier. The +2 Chain Shirt. This is another leveled version of the chain shirt and +1 chain shirt, and in this case it gives you 15 armor class, 1 resistance to slashing damage, and a +1 bonus to your dexterity saving throws and dexterity ability checks. If you are wearing a +1 chain shirt already and are sort of a stealthy medium armor character and you are actually making stealth checks, it's theoretically possible that you could gain some benefit out of the +2 chain shirt. You can similarly swap it in to increase your dexterity checks, just like the Hedge Wanderer armor. And it's available starting at character level 5 from character level 5 to 8 at the merchants. So you're going to be able to get this comfortably during Act 1. It is similarly available at a time where you already have a bunch of 15 AC options available, and only one level before you get your first 16 AC option. So the +2 chain shirt has some utility if you want a stealthy medium armor during Act 1. Then the +2 chain shirt can be marginally better than the +1 breastplate, and so you could upgrade to that. I'm going to put it in B tier, just like the +1 chain shirt, for the same reason, though again, these are such minor upgrades that it's not something that I would worry about seeking out specifically. The +2 Hide. The +2 Hide armor gives you 14 armor class, and +1 to your dex save and ability checks, and +1 initiative. It's also available starting at character level 5, and available on it to the end game. Now, at level 5, this is probably our first option for a plus initiative gear if we're a medium armor user. And so, plus initiative gear just being absolutely broken in Baldur's Gate 3. This is still an A-tier armor just because initiative is actually that good. Being able to have plus initiative on your chest slot is very important. Light or unarmored users are already using the graceful cloth at this point to increase their initiative. So being able to increase your party's initiative with the +2 hide is definitely worth losing 1 AC compared to the Githyanki half-plate. It also makes you better at lockpicking and better at dexterity saves and checks, which isn't super relevant, but the +1 initiative from the +2 hide armor is still just very good. Any piece of gear with +1 initiative on it is always worth considering in Baldur's Gate, because initiative is so critical to winning in honor mode, so the +2 hide is actually a very good armor. Looks unassuming, but is one that you should definitely at least consider, especially for high damage or high control setups that want to end the fight on the first turn. The Jolty Vest. So the Jolty Vest is a +1 chain shirt, as in 14 AC and 1 resistance to slashing damage. But also, if you take damage while you have lightning charges and are wearing the Jolty Vest, the attacker has to make a DC 14 dex save or become shocked. Shocked prevents enemies from taking reactions and gives them disadvantage on dex saves and checks. So you can pass out disadvantage on dexterity saves to enemies that hit you if you're charged with lightning. This is, DC 14 dex save is relatively easy for enemies to pass at this point, and the shocked mechanic is just such a nothing of a mechanic. Unfortunately, preventing enemies from taking reactions is just not that powerful, especially when you don't get to choose when to impose it. It's not like you can use this aggressively in order to prevent an enemy from counterspelling or making an opportunity attack. The enemy has to deal damage to you, which means that it is going to be somewhat random where it gets passed out. And enemies who are dealing damage to you are not that often enemies who have reactions that you actually want to get rid of. You're much better off if you want to impose reaction loss on enemies doing it proactively than doing it reactively like this. That said, it's still a +1 chain shirt with a marginal bonus, available very slightly later in the game, but you can do some cool stuff with lightning charge builds. So I'm going to put it in C tier because it's not a terrible item. It's strictly better than an item that you might be wearing at the point where you have access to the Jolty Vest. So there are theoretically times where you might want to buy this. It's just not something that you're going to go out of your way to pick up. So C tier. And finally, the last of our Act 1 armors, the Adamantine Scale Mail. This gives you 16 base armor class, so is tied for the highest armor class medium armor available in Act 1, reduces all incoming damage by 1, and attackers cannot critically hit you, which significantly reduces the danger to your character. In addition to that, whenever an enemy does hit you with a melee attack, they get 2 turns of reeling, which gives them a -1 penalty to attack rolls for every turn remaining. Reeling is identical to radiating orbs in terms of mechanics, but applied differently, and it's not as easy to stack reeling up to absurd values, so it won't be as broken as the Luminous Armour, but still, that's a very powerful effect, so if you do get hit, it makes enemies much worse at hitting you in future. The Adamantine Scale Mail is just the top tier defensive medium armor for most of the game. It's just the best in slot for any character that wants to stay alive. Great for barbarians, great for clerics, just an awesome medium armor. Great armor class, solid magical ability that prevents you from taking multiple hits. Completely removes one of the main sources of player deaths, which is getting critically hit when you weren't expecting to, and having your health spike down to 0, and that can snowball a fight in the enemy's favor if you have to then spend actions getting that character back up and so on. So it just removes one source of potential losses entirely from the game by making you immune to critical hits, and reducing all incoming damage by 1 is a very relevant ability. It especially stacks well with other sources of damage reduction or resistance, which is why it's so awesome for barbarians who can gain resistance to a bunch of damage types, and then reduce that even further with the Adamantine Scale Mail. All of these abilities, I've said this before about armors, but some armors are collections of different abilities that don't work very well together, and as a result are not very good. The Adamantine Scale Mail is exactly the opposite. It's a collection of a bunch of different abilities, all of which work together to make an incredibly strong package. And so the Adamantine Scale Mail is just best in slot for defensive characters, S-tier armor, which should come as no surprise to anyone. And now for our Act 2 armors, starting with the +2 Scale Mail. Before I talk about Act 2 armors, though, let me just quickly note that there are 20 Act 1 armors available, which is more medium armors available in Act 1 alone than there are light armor sets in the entire game. So that should give you some idea of why so many light armor characters want to get medium armor proficiency, and end up using medium armor instead, because medium armors are just way more numerous, and on the whole, way more powerful than light armors in Baldur's Gate 3. There's just so many more options available when it comes to medium armor. The +2 scale is available from merchants starting at character level 7, meaning that you'll either get it quite late in Act 1 or early in Act 2, depending on exactly how much content you do in each act and what order you're playing through the game in. I've placed it in Act 2 because I think that either way, the first time you get significant use out of it will usually be in Act 2, but this is still technically available in Act 1 for playthroughs that do all of the Act 1 content. It gives you 16 base armor class and 1 slashing resistance, as well as a +1 bonus to your initiative rolls. And if we've learned nothing else, initiative rolls are always going to be extremely relevant, and so 16 AC with a +1 bonus to your initiative is higher AC than you have from anything other than the Adamantine scale or the +1 half plate at this point. And is just going to be a strict upgrade if you're using the +1 half plate or you're using the +2 hide, then the scale mail is going to be better. Defensively minded characters are still going to be better off with the Adamantine scale. Characters with higher dexterity are going to be better off with the Yuan-ti scale mail, which is available around the same time. But there's definitely going to be characters that want the 16 base AC and want the +1 initiative, and so are going to benefit from the +2 scale. So I'm going to put it in A tier because it's not every character that's going to use this, but this is definitely an armor that a lot of parties are going to buy and make use of. You will never be sad to have it equipped because it's just a very solid piece of armor overall. The Barkskin Armour. So the Barkskin Armour has 12 base AC, but that doesn't matter because it gives you the passive that you always have Barkskin, like the spell, cast on your character, which sets your AC to 16 with no means of increasing or decreasing it. So your AC while you're wearing this armor will always be exactly 16. There is a bug where if you have both a shield and the Cloak of Protection equipped with this armor, you get 17 AC, even though either a shield or the Cloak of Protection alone only give you 16 AC. So I don't know why that works exactly, but you can technically boost your armor up to 17 when you're wearing this. It also gives you advantage on Constitution saves. Now, 16 AC sounds reasonable, because we've looked at a lot of other 16 AC armors that are good, but those let you increase your AC further with dexterity or shields. So, like, the Adamantine scale is you either have 18 or 20 AC almost certainly, because you're adding your dexterity bonus and maybe a shield bonus when you have the Adamantine scale equipped. The Barkskin armor is always 16, no more, no less. So you are losing quite a bit of armor class in order to get that advantage on Constitution saves when you're equipping the Barkskin armor. There might theoretically be a circumstance where this is good, but most of the time, advantage on Constitution saves is there to help you maintain concentration on spells, and not getting hit is pretty important for maintaining concentration on spells, so decreasing your armor class by 2 to 4 in order to gain advantage on Constitution saves is sort of counterproductive. Like, you're better at maintaining concentration if you get hit, but you're just going to get hit more often, so it sort of offsets the bonus. For that reason, a character that can't otherwise reach higher armor classes than 16 for whatever reason, maybe you're playing a low dexterity character or something, might be able to use the Barkskin armor, but otherwise you're just not going to be able to make use of this armor effectively. I'm going to put it in C tier because there is, if you're playing like a challenge run where everybody has to have 8 dexterity, you could use the Barkskin armor in something along those lines, but otherwise this armor is just never going to see any use. The Dark Justiciar half plate. So the DJ Half-Plate, which is what I'm going to call it because it will speed things up, and also because DJ Half-Plate is the name of my alter ego as a European electronica artist, gives you 16 base armor class, the ability to cast Shield of Faith once per long rest, which is Shield of Faith just like the spell, requires your concentration and increases your armor class by 2, gives you advantage on Constitution saving throws, so already it's just way better than the Barkskin Armour, because it gives you the same armor class without capping it at 16, and advantage on con saves alongside other abilities, and gives you, while obscured, you have advantage on stealth checks. Now, most of the time in Baldur's Gate, in order to make a stealth check at all, you have to be obscured, because if you're in a fully lit area, you automatically fail stealth checks. So the only time when you'd be making a stealth check while not obscured is if you're in invisibility, like greater invisibility. So effectively, this armor gives you 16 base AC, advantage on con saves, advantage on stealth checks, and the ability to cast Shield of Faith once per long rest. 16 AC and advantage on con saves is just great for a spellcaster. Any spellcaster can use a high armor class armor that gives them advantage on Constitution saving throws. That's obviously a really solid set of abilities. The advantage on stealth checks isn't amazing, but this is worth noting as a 16 AC armor class that doesn't give you disadvantage on stealth checks, and in fact gives you advantage on stealth checks. So you can benefit from so this does let you make stealth checks while in medium armor, and the ability to cast Shield of Faith once per long rest is not usually super powerful, because most spellcasters are going to have better things to concentrate on, but is, a nice little bonus for when you don't have something else that you want to use. You can just start your first combat of the day with +2 armor class until you want to cast something else that takes your concentration. Most of the time you're not going to use this ability a lot, but it is a just small bonus that you have available when you do want to use it. Mostly this is just 16 armor class and advantage on Constitution saves, but that's just a very powerful package for an armor. I'm going to put it in A tier because, again, it is going to be slightly less attractive than the Adamantine scale mail for a lot of characters, where the defensive options of the Adamantine scale will still let you maintain concentration better. And for clerics in particular, who are one of the classes that would want to use the DJ Half-Plate, you're going to be using the Luminous Armour most of the time anyways. So the DJ armor is just going to be slightly less powerful than a lot of other options, but it's still an excellent armor and one that you should definitely keep in mind for a lot of different builds. The Psionic Ward Armor. So this gives you 15 base armor class, and if you are a Gith, so if you're either a Githyanki or disguised as one using Disguise Self, then you gain resistance to psychic damage, taking half damage from all psychic damage. You also get, whenever you succeed on a saving throw against a spell, you heal for 1d4. The 1d4 healing, whenever you succeed on a saving throw, is not particularly relevant. It's a very, very minor ability. But resistance to psychic damage is actually pretty relevant and relatively difficult to come by in Baldur's Gate, so it gives you the option to pick that up when you're going into a fight with a lot of psychic damage available. The Psionic Ward Armor you could swap that in for that fight. For non-Githyanki, you have to also use this alongside Disguise Self, but that's something that you do have access to for free during the game, because that's a ritual spell, so you are able to use that. So if you have a party member who you know is going to be taking psychic damage, the Psionic Ward Armor is one that could be useful for those encounters. That being said, that is a very minor subset of encounters, like it's not that many encounters, and it does decrease your armor class, and you lose other defensive options when you're wearing the Psionic Ward Armor. So I'm going to put it in C tier as a niche option for very specific encounters. Not a totally useless armor, but one that is not going to be used that frequently. The Sharpened Snare Cuirass. The Sharpened Snare Cuirass gives you 14 base armor class, but lets you use your entire dexterity bonus for your armor class. So most medium armors cap the dexterity bonus that you can gain to AC at 2. The Sharpened Snare gives you up to your full dexterity. So if you have 20 dexterity, you're getting 19 AC from this 14 plus your full dexterity bonus. This is better armor class than is available from any light armors at this point in the game. So if you have a character with high dexterity, you are better off with one of these uncapped medium armors than you are in light armor, just gaining even more armor class, even from the weakest of them, the Sharpened Snare Cuirass, or at least the lowest AC one of them, the Sharpened Snare Cuirass. This gives you, it also gives you the Sharpened Snare ability, where creatures have disadvantage on saving throws when resisting your attacks and spells that inflict restrained. Now, weirdly enough, this tooltip is very odd, because restrained is a specific condition, but the thing that it gives disadvantage against is actually not anything that inflicts restrained. It gives disadvantage against a couple magic items, and the Ensnaring Strike ability of Rangers. Ensnaring Strike is a spell that inflicts, is a spell that inflicts ensnare on the target, not restrained. So it's odd that they put restrained in the tooltip when they meant ensnared. Giving the enemy disadvantage on effects that inflict ensnared is not a totally irrelevant ability, though since this is a ranger ability, you could also take the Bounty Hunter ranger feature in order to cause enemies disadvantage on that effect. But the Sharpened Snare Cuirass allows you to give them disadvantage on the effects from items as well. So you can do kind of a cool entangling build with the Cruel Sting item, the Wood-Woad Shield item, the Ballast Gloves, all of which do work with the Sharpened Snare Cuirass. So you can do kind of an ensnaring build using that item set. Given that this also gives you pretty decent armor class, because it lets you use your full dexterity, I'm going to put it in B tier, because it's worse than the other medium armors that give you your full dexterity, but does enable a kind of cool entangling build alongside those other items. So if you use it with those other items, then you can make this character that just entangles enemies with disadvantage on the saving throws, so it does so pretty reliably, does a bunch of additional damage to ensnared enemies, and so on, and the Sharpened Snare Cuirass is an important part of that. The Yuan-ti Scale Mail. The Yuan-ti Scale Mail gives you 15 base armor class, but also, like the Sharpened Snare Cuirass, allows you to apply your full dexterity bonus to your armor class. So this will, if you have 20 AC, give you 20 armor class with the 15 from the Yuan-ti Scale Mail. In Act 2, this is the highest armor class setup available. The Yuan-ti Scale Mail plus having high dexterity plus wearing a shield is the highest armor class setup available, and that stays true throughout Act 3, that these uncapped medium armors are the best armor class setups in the game, even including heavy armors, because allowing you to apply, giving you decent base AC and allowing you to apply your whole dexterity bonus gives you the highest armor class available. In addition to that, it gives you +1 to your initiative rolls. So if you're a dexterity-based character, you're getting very high initiative from this, because you have high dexterity and get +1, and that means you'll reliably win your initiative checks. And unlike normal scale armor, it doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks, so for like a stealth archer or something like that, the Yuan-ti Scale Mail is going to be your go-to, because you can make these attacks without, you can have high initiative, make these attacks without losing your stealth, because you don't have disadvantage on stealth checks, and have some of the highest armor class setups available in the game. For that reason, the Yuan-ti Scale Mail is just an excellent set of armor, gives you some of the highest available armor class. It's the reason the Sharpened Snare is in B tier, is just that the Yuan-ti Scale is available around the same time and just has higher AC, and the +1 initiative is even better. If the Yuan-ti Scale didn't exist, the Sharpened Snare would actually be quite a bit higher up on the tiers. But as is, this is just the gold standard Act 2 armor for dexterity characters. It is one of the reasons that dexterity-based characters in Baldur's Gate should consider whether it's feasible for them to get medium armor proficiency, because these uncapped medium armors are just so good for those characters. And finally, for our Act 2 armors, the very rare or purple version of the Dark Justiciar halfplate. The rare DJ halfplate, which is what I'm going to call it, is identical to the DJ halfplate, except it gives you 17 armor class instead of 16, and is locked behind a story event. And in addition to all of the other abilities, which, just to remind you, are advantage on stealth checks while obscured, advantage on constitution saving throws, and the ability to cast Shield of Faith once per long rest, you also get, while you have Shield of Faith active, You reduce all incoming damage by 2, and reflect damage received back at the attacker, who take 1d4 necrotic damage. The Sharin items have this sub-theme of interacting with Shield of Faith, which unfortunately is still not a very good item, not a very good effect, but giving it 2 damage reduction does make it a little bit more attractive when that's on an item that's already very good. Mostly, though, this is just an upgrade to the DJ half-plate, which is just a 16 AC armor with Constitution save, with advantage on con saves associated with it. The rare DJ half-plate is a 17 AC armor with advantage on Constitution saves associated with it, which is just a way better item. You aren't sacrificing any defense. In fact, you're improving your defense in order to gain the advantage on con saves. This is also the highest AC medium armor available in Act 2, other than the uncapped dex ones, which will reach higher values, but this is still just a very good way to boost your armor class. Just an excellent armor overall. 17 AC and advantage on con saves is just great, and is going to be a top tier pick for any character, any spellcasting character with medium armor proficiency, so it goes straight into S tier. And, starting in on our Act 3 armors, let's talk about the quote-unquote +1 breastplate. The +1 breastplate is identical to a normal breastplate. It's a joke item that gives you the ability to bring any +1, any additional person, to a wedding or similar event. Obviously, from a mechanical standpoint, a breastplate, a non-magical breastplate available only in Act 3, is a D tier item, but it is a very funny joke, and just for completion's sake, we're including it in the tier list. And the +2 breastplate. This is just an upgrade over the +1 breastplate, the real one, not the joke one. And it gives you 16 base AC, 1 resistance to piercing damage, and an increase, a +1 bonus to your dex saving throws and ability checks, while being available from merchants starting at player level 9. You can get this maybe end of Act 2 if you've done a lot of content, or early Act 3, depending on exactly how much you've leveled up. But the +2 breastplate by this point, a 16 AC armor, is just outclassed in so many ways. You have better armor available with higher armor class, and you have better 16 AC armor with the +2 scale mail, which just gives you +2 initiative. There's no reason you would want the +2 breastplate over the +2 scale mail in most circumstances, so it is going straight into D tier. Unfortunately, by the time you get this item, it's just obsoleted by better items. The +2 half-plate. This is a 17 AC armor, also available starting at character level 9 from the shops, and it gives you 2 piercing damage resistance. Now, this is your first access to a 17 AC medium armor, other than one locked behind a story event, the rare DJ armor. The +2 half-plate is therefore not totally irrelevant, because 17 AC armor is something that you will want at this point in the game. You will have other opportunities to grab 17 AC armor, but it's possible that this is the first that you run into, in which case it's going to be a reasonable purchase for most builds. By this point, though, it's unlikely that you want to swap off of one of the other armors that you're using. Either you're a high dex character, in which case you're using the Yuan-ti scale mail. A spellcaster is not going to want to swap off the DJ plate, even if they don't have access to the upgraded version of that. A character that wants defenses is going to want to stick with the Adamantine scale mail, probably, because it's reducing, eliminating crits is better than +1 AC under most circumstances, and the Luminous Armour is just still broken. So the +2 half-plate, unfortunately, just doesn't have a niche to fill for most parties, but it's a decent second option if you already have, like, if you have a sort of not specialized character, or 2 characters that are specialized in the same thing, and one of them is already using one of these other armors. So because it's a reasonable armor pick, I'm going to put it in B tier. It's fine for specific party setups, but not something that you're going to go out of your way to grab. The Elven Chain. So this is a super interesting item, the Elven Chain, because of how it works in the game, and also just because of the sheer power level of the item. It's a 14 base AC armor that gives you +2 to your initiative rolls, and advantage on dexterity saving throws. Advantage on dex saves is a minor but nice to have bonus, but obviously any item that gives you +2 to your initiative rolls, initiative checks, is going to be incredibly powerful and absolutely worth looking at. So even if it was just a 14 AC medium armor with +2 to initiative, it would still be pretty usable in a wide array of parties, just because initiative bonuses are that good in Baldur's Gate 3. But it also has the Elven Chain passive, which means that you count as proficient whenever you're wearing it. So characters that don't normally have medium armor proficiency can still use the Elven Chain without losing access to their spellcasting or taking disadvantage on their effects. So like a rogue or even a wizard can wear the Elven Chain just fine, even without any proficiency in armor. This gets, which is pretty cool for those characters, but gets even cooler when you look at how this effect was actually implemented in Baldur's Gate 3. The Elven Chain, the way that they decided to implement it was by just making it not count as armor at all, for the purposes of most effects that care about armor. It just counts as cloth. So they sort of hacked proficiency in everything just by making it count as cloth armor, which you don't need proficiency to be able to wear. What that means is that effects that normally require you to be not wearing armor still work when you have the Elven Chain on. So things like the Bracers of Defense and Monk's bonus movement speed still work just fine when you have the Elven Chain on. So you can actually increase your armor class even further with the Bracers of Defense, and have 16 base AC with this, plus the Bracers of Defense. Or you can use this as a monk, get 14 base AC and still go really fast. It doesn't work super well with Monk or Barbarian's unarmored defense. Those abilities will still be active, but because of how armor abilities are calculated in Baldur's Gate 3, it will only use the higher of the 14 AC or the unarmored defense. So if you're a monk with 20 wisdom, you'll gain 1 more armor class than you would with just the Elven Chain equipped. And if you're a monk with like 16 wisdom, you won't gain any more armor class than just the 14 base AC from the Elven Chain. But the fact that this allows you to use the Bracers of Defense, the Bone Spike Boots, and so on, things that care about you not having armor equipped, means that the Elven Chain is super powerful, in addition to its incredibly strong effects. Mostly this won't be used by medium armor characters, but instead is going to be used by wizards or rogues, wizards, sorcerers, rogues, warlocks, etc., that don't get medium armor proficiency naturally, just to give them a higher armor class option that also increases their AC, their initiative significantly. Light armor characters have access to the elegant studded leather, or if they take the right story option, the ballast armor, but +2 initiative and 14 AC for a spellcaster is just an awesome option. So the Elven Chain, even aside from the weird stuff where you can benefit from things that normally want you to be unarmored, is still just an awesome item, and definitely S tier. The Unwanted Masterwork Scale Mail. So this item is another one of the armors, the medium armors, that give you uncapped bonuses to your dexterity. It has 16 base AC and lets you use your full dexterity for armor class. So a character with 20 dexterity would have 21 AC when wearing this, 16 base plus 5 from their dexterity. It also gives you resistance to fire damage, which is a pretty relevant resistance type. Fire damage is very common throughout the entire game, including in Act 3, so you're going to be benefiting from increased survivability from fire resistance. Fire resistance is relatively easy to come by, but still just a nice thing to have available on your armor. The main thing holding this armor back is just that there are better options. The Yuan-ti scale mail you have already, so a character who wants an uncapped armor has the Yuan-ti scale mail, which is only 1 less AC, but most characters are willing to trade 1 AC for +1 initiative, so most characters are going to use the Yuan-ti scale mail, and characters that want the defensive options have access to the Armour of Agility, which I'll talk about next, which just blows the Unwanted Masterwork scale mail out of the water from a defensive standpoint, and they're available about the same time. So the Unwanted Masterwork scale mail doesn't unfortunately have much of a niche, I guess hence the name. And so for most parties, you're going to be better off with some combination of the Yuan-ti scale mail and the Armour of Agility rather than using this. If you have a lot of characters that have high dexterity and medium armor proficiency, one of them could end up wearing the Unwanted Masterwork scale mail, and that would be fine. So I'm going to put it in B tier because it is a powerful item in and of itself. It's just that there are options that are slightly better than it in its category. So it feels a little weird to put it in B tier because it's a very good armor set. It's just that for that effect, you have better options elsewhere. The Armour of Agility. The Armour of Agility is another of the uncapped medium armors, and it gives you 17 base AC and +2 to your saving throws. So a character with 20 dexterity has 22 AC when wearing the Armour of Agility, 17 base, plus 5 from their dexterity. The Armour of Agility is the armor set that gives you the highest AC values in the game. All of the highest AC characters in the game are going to be wearing this because it lets you have 17 base AC, still use all of your dexterity, which you can increase even further with items. To gain high armor class, you can use a shield alongside it to increase your armor class even further. So the Armour of Agility, just if you want high AC, this is the best way to do it. A lot of characters who are high dexterity characters, so archers, dexterity fighters, anything along those lines, dexterity paladins are going to end up wearing this because it gives you a ton of armor class and just makes you really hard to kill. You're going to be easily able to reach 30 armor class with setups with the Armour of Agility, and item setups and spells and so on, so that can make you basically invincible to physical attacks. The Armour of Agility, the sheer stats on this item are just make it an incredible find, and it is S tier for sure. Just one of the best items, one of the best armor sets in the game, and it, I think, is going to be a pretty rare party that actually ends the game without a character in this armor, because it just gives you the highest AC values, and thus the best bang for your buck. +2 saving throws is also very relevant. It's going to keep your character alive against mental targeting effects, which, since with their high AC they're immune to physical attacks, more or less, is also super powerful because the only thing that can really take out a character wearing this armor set and using it to its highest, to the fullest potential of the armor set is going to be something like a fear or a dominate effect, which this armor is also good against. So if you just want a defensive setup, the Armour of Agility is the item for you. And finally, the Flame Enamelled Armor. The Flame Enamelled Armor gives you 16 base armor class, +2 to your initiative, +2 to your saving throws, similar to the Armour of Agility, and resistance to fire damage, as well as the ability to cast Fire Shield Warm once per long rest. The Fire Shield cast is not super relevant for most characters, although is a nice little bonus. You can definitely benefit a little bit from it on some characters. It does also give you cold resistance, so for fights where you want it, you have both cold resistance and fire resistance, because the Flame Enamelled Armor inherently has fire resistance. +2 to saving throws, again, just like with the Armour of Agility, makes you much harder to take out with fearing or dominating or paralyzing effects, which, given that this armor gives you a lot of resistance to physical damage due to high AC and resistance to damage in general due to high AC and the damage, the elemental damage resistances that it applies, is going to help keep you alive. And of course, +2 to initiative is just an incredibly strong ability that any character can use very well. 16 base AC and +2 to initiative is awesome. Just means that you can have a high armor class character also going first, even without a heavy investment in dexterity. This will let you potentially respec out of alert on some characters if you have enough initiative gear. And so the Flame Enamelled Armor is just, again, a very solid set of abilities that all work well together, give you a ton of very powerful options, and just boost your party level's power immensely when you pick it up. Great default option if none of these other S-tier armors appeal to you. You can never go wrong with the Flame Enamelled Armor, S-tier armor as well. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at all of the medium armors in Baldur's Gate 3. I know there are a lot of them, because medium armor is just super plentiful. It definitely was the developer's favorite kind of armor, because as you can see, there's a ton of S-tier medium armors, a ton of A-tier medium armors, all of which are very good as well. And even the B and C-tier armors from the medium armor set are not as weak as the B and C-tier armors from light armor or cloth. The average quality of medium armors is just very, very high across the board, and the top-end quality is incredibly high, with a lot of bonus initiative, a lot of bonus saving throws, the highest possible ACs in the game, and so on, all available through medium armor, alongside, of course, the incredibly broken power of the Luminous Armour that remains best in slot throughout the entire game for any build that is set up to abuse radiating orbs. Medium armor overall is just an excellent armor option to have on any character, and I think that in Baldur's Gate, just because these armors are so good, when you're building a character, you should think to yourself, one question you should ask yourself is, can I get medium armor access on this character easily? Because it will improve that character significantly if they're able to do that through a cleric dip or just being a Gith. Will improve your character quite a bit. People ask me sometimes why I include Gith as one of the top tier races in almost every build I do. I say you could build this as a Githyanki and they will be an excellent, and this should give you a little more idea of why, because the medium armor proficiency is just so powerful thanks to how powerful medium armors are in Baldur's Gate. As always, if you enjoyed the video, definitely feel free to hit like and leave a comment, and if you think that there's something that I misplaced, please do leave a comment below, or if I missed something or misunderstood a mechanic in your opinion, please do leave a comment below and let me know. I'm very open to moving things around based on community feedback. I'm recording these before posting the previous ones, so I haven't seen feedback on the previous ones yet, but I will correct anything that needs to be corrected, or anything that you can convince me to move, I will move in a future video. As always, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed it, and of course you can subscribe to my channel for more of this. We will be back with heavy armor and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.